Hey, Mindy. What's up? What's up?
Hey, Maria. This is another beautiful day in paradise here in Alaska. It's just beautiful here. I love March is my favorite month. You know, I've got sun on my solar panels, and it's just beautiful outside. How are things down in your neck of the woods?
We don't have blue skies today, but we have had them almost every day lately, so it's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice. So here we are at another episode of Mindy and Maria, Maria and Mindy, and we're attacking attack is such a crazy word. We're going to be discussing some topics that are just really timely and important, and it's under the banner of AKA, which is a new platform that we're developing, Alaska Kicks Ass, awareness, knowledge, acknowledge, opening your mind and looking at things from a different perspective. And what I love about our conversations is that Maria and I come to things from really different perspectives. And so this is the epic battle between freedom and control.
And control.
And control, yeah. And we are of the sovereign, independent, freedom-minded people, and welcome to our show. I think that we've got some really great things to cover today. Might end up being in a couple little snippets, but I think it's going to be great. So what do you got for us before we get started here, Maria?
Hey, let's just go. I'm dying to hear your checker versus chess.
Nice.
Chess versus
okay.
Checkers.
Yeah, and checkers versus chess and awake versus woke, these two things are really similar. And I think that okay, so I want to start with awake versus woke because it lays a foundation for checkers versus chess. And
okay.
It came to me one day, you know, because I for many years, I look at my awakening process starting when I was a very young girl. I was very wide awake, paying attention to the things that were going on around me. And I'm of the mind where I knew that from a very young age in the 70s that I vibrated at a very high frequency. And I kind of talked about it with other people. I'm like, well, I'm zooming right now, or, you know, I'm vibrating, you know, and now it's a thing, right? And you hear these people talking about vibrations, and I think it's lovely that people are talking about it. But during my awakening, it really happened in the 90s, and it was a very slow process. And there was nobody to talk to, and I would get this, I would kind of see something, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And I would try to do some research, and of course it's before the internet, and people would come into my world, and I would meet them, and they would give me information, and I would talk about them as being pathfinders or information gatherers, and people, I don't even remember half of their names. You know, I would meet them, I don't know, sitting in a bar, and they would give me this good information. I'd be like, whoa, mind-blowing information, and it would give me this new insight. And I could awaken slowly. And the nice thing about awakening slowly in the 90s and the early 2000s is that we could hit snooze. So those of us who awakened slowly back in the day, you could just go back to sleep, you know, and just, you know, go about, you know, doing your job, watching TV, and blah, blah, and then another bit of information would come in and be like, whoa, and your eyes would be wide open and be like, this isn't right, and you could awaken again, and then you could hit snooze again. And so I come from this era of awakening where it was a very slow, gradual process, and it was something that I did organically on my own, and it became easier and easier with the advent of the internet, because back in the day, when the internet was fully open and active and they weren't censoring things, there was not that disinformation campaign that started about 5 years ago. You could get a lot of information very readily, and it was amazing. And what I love about that time period is that I was able to print a lot of things out, document a lot of things, but really learn a lot in a very short period of time, because there wasn't a lot of other people out there in the Great Awakening movement. And so there were a small amount of players. Like when I first started listening to the X-22 report, it was in episode 50 or something like that, you know, and there was like 1,000 people that watched it, you know, and And now, of course, X22, he's on like 2,400 something or another, and he's got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers, and it's amazing. But, back in the day, there was only a handful, and there was still nobody to talk to about it. And if you met somebody that was also awake, it was like meeting a soulmate in a way, because you're like, oh, my God, I can talk to you freely, and I don't have to edit everything I'm saying. And it was beautiful. So fast forward to the last 2 years, where this quote-unquote Great Awakening has become this woke movement. And I look at woke, and I was talking about it on my radio show here locally, and it's like I really have a lot of compassion for people that are waking up now, because they don't have the luxury of hitting snooze. And it's kind of like being hit over the sledgehammer, or somebody coming into your room with a trumpet, and you're just like, woo! And you're like, all right, I'm awake. Here's a cowbell right next to my head. All right, I'm awake. But you're not awake. You've been woken up. And if you've ever been woken up by a loud noise, whether it be your alarm at 4 o'clock in the morning because you've got someplace you got to go and you don't want to get up that early, or somebody comes into your room. I remember when I was a kid, my mom would come in yelling at me or something, and you're like, fine, I've woken up. You're not awakening. You've been woken up. And when you wake up, that is jarring. It's terrifying. It's confusing. You don't have your senses about you. You don't even have your equilibrium. A lot of times you can't even stand up right away when you've been woken up by an earthquake, for instance, or a loud sound outside. There's a level of fear associated with being woken up versus awakening naturally. When you don't have to set the alarm and you wake up and you stretch a little bit, and maybe you can roll over and you can lay in bed and think about what your day is going to bring, and then you can slowly get out of bed, or maybe you're excited about what's happening that day and you jump right out of bed because something really exciting is happening. You're like, yes, I'm awake. Today is the day, There's a huge difference between awakening and being woken up. And a lot of what is happening in our society today is woken. And I have so much compassion for you if that was your experience, if coming to some of this knowledge that you're seeing in this alternative media is new for you, and you don't really have your bearings about yourself. You don't have a foundation for it, and it's coming to you, and it's hitting you on the side of the head, and you get thrown off kilter a little bit. And I just want to be one of those voices there for you that says it's okay, and it's going to be okay. And yes, it's scary when you first start hearing this information, but there's a lot of people on your side, and there's a lot of good information out there, and it doesn't have to be scary. And if you haven't listened to, we're going to make a couple of little separate. So this is the Awaken versus Woke segment. If you haven't listened to my checkers versus chess, now is a really good time to listen to that video, because it is going to give you a good perspective for dealing with some of this information that maybe you just got side, what they call it, a curveball, right? You just got hit in the solar plexus, and maybe it happened a year ago, but you still haven't recovered from it. And maybe you just need to get on good footing. And if you need a good foundation, listen to that checkers versus chess, because I think that that's going to really help you out a lot. Before we end this, Maria, did you have any questions or want to input anything into this dialogue? And what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The woke movement, I would say, is going to become important when we talk about awake versus woke, as far as how that fits into Hegelian dialectic.
Yep, that'll be another video that you can look up.
Yeah, but I think you've explained, I think you're starting to make that distinction, and I think it does need to be made, and I think it's going to become a theme.
You like this? You like what I've kind of come up with here? Because to me it makes sense, because I got to wake up slowly, and I think you got to wake up slowly. And when we were waking up, there wasn't a lot of people that we could talk about, so we could really use our critical thinking in our own minds to solidify some of this information long before we ever had a chance to really talk about it with other people that, maybe we didn't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And I don't think there was an agenda around us finding information or not finding information quite as much as there is right at this moment. We can see it happening right before our eyes that you don't get to know certain information. So that's
and you
important.
Don't even know who to trust anymore. And when 5 years ago, when you were doing research on the internet, I'm even going to go back 5, 6, even 7 years, they had not really started, they being, this is freedom versus control. So they being the controllers of social media, which includes YouTube and Google searches and their algorithms, before all of that stuff kind of came into play, there really was no disinformation campaign out there. So if you put in, I'm going to come up with something, black pyramid just came into my head, right? And you type that into a Google search, the only information that's going to come up would be the quote-unquote conspiracy theories. There was nothing out there to debunk that conspiracy theory, and I don't really know that much about that particular conspiracy theory. It just came to my head. But if you wanted to look up something on aliens or something on that you were going to get information that people were putting out there about things that they were learning about that particular subject versus people that were saying anything you say about that subject is stupid and it's not true.
Exactly, so the internet was more like the wild, wild west at the time.
The good old days, right? Who knew that we'd be talking about 5 years ago being the good old days,
Yeah, I mean, actually, well, and it's really true because now the censorship is on things that are current.
That's right. Yeah, and it's really hard to discern. And so looking at this being the awake versus woke, one of the reasons, Maria, why I was ready to come out of my cave here in the far north. I'm not on any social media. I got off of everything. I've never had a Google account, so I have literally never subscribed to any YouTube channel, but it doesn't mean that I'm not on it all the time watching videos. I just can't subscribe or like or share, or I can share, but I can't be in any of the comments. So I'm really far removed from a lot of that stuff, but it doesn't mean I'm not paying attention. I feel that, my calling, if you want to call it that, is to not tell people at all what to think, but help them learn how to ask questions and help them learn how to figure out what is true and what is disinformation. And the truth is really all about, that's really all I care about. I don't care if I don't have a personal agenda. I'm not trying to bring somebody over to my camp. Every time I learn something new, it opens up 5,000 more questions than answers. I always have more questions than answers. And anytime I look at something, I always try to look at something under the guise of what if it's true and what if it's not true? And what do those two things mean to me, if it's true or if it's not true? Because the truth is, we don't know. and you can keep saying, what if it's true, if it's not true? And that is always going to lead to deeper knowledge.
You're going to hold a thought in your mind until it can be confirmed or verified, until you're convinced. But I do have a question for you, because you said you had very much compassion about people who've had to awaken suddenly, and you refer to that as the woke situation that we're
woke
talking
movement,
about.
100%. That is the woke movement.
But the question is, do you have a particular opinion when you hear that somebody's woke? Do you think that means something particular rather than something kind of generic? What we say when we say, I wasn't awake then, but I'm awake now. Does woke mean to you something in particular?
Well, I've got twofold answers to that, and the first answer I have is the word woke probably means something different to everybody, and because it is a thing now, I think that it was a concept for me when I first started talking about this a couple of years ago, and then it became a movement. So it went from being just conceptual to being a movement. I think that there is a woke movement, and that woke movement is just rife with misinformation. And I have a lot of compassion for people who get caught up in any system of programming. And because my whole thing is to try to keep from being programmed. And the programming systems that are out there, we can talk about this way more. And I think that getting into checkers and chess is going to really explain a lot of that. But this programming that they've got going on is so profound that it's almost like a mind war every single day to dodge those bullets, you know? And
it is. And the next question really is, do you think, don't you think, because I do, that there's always some common ground there, that there are some true points that are coming through the woke movement, for sure.
Absolutely, and that's the beautiful thing about the programming system, and that's why it's so difficult to dodge those bullets, because the system that is that we live in, and again, we've got this checkers and chess concept, but this system that we're living in that's one of the tools that they use. It's almost like a bait and switch, where they're going to give you some good information, and then they're going to mix it up with mis or disinformation, because the whole concept behind programming is they want to make it very, very difficult for you to think on your own.
Yeah.
And they give you bullet points, headlines, taglines, and hashtags that are all designed to trigger an emotional response. And that emotional response, again, is like your alarm going off at 4 o'clock in the morning. And each time they do it, it makes you more and more anxious, fearful, reactionary. So instead of being able to look at something and saying, I wonder what this means, you're just like, I can't believe this is happening, you know, and it's that, it's trying to find, if even one person that's listening to this who is having these negative emotional responses to headlines in the news, even if just one person that listens to this is able to take that reactionary, fear-based, woke, being hit over the sledgehammer, fear-based reaction and turn that into, I don't have to react to that. I can just read that as a headline and actually try to figure out what they mean by that, because that's not my game. And I don't have to react to that. And this is all going to make a lot more sense when I talk about checkers and chess, because now we're really getting into that concept of checkers and chess. And I think that if
we're gonna take a little pause and talk about checkers and chess for a minute, but I wanted to bring up again. It makes so much sense when you think about what you said about the control, the powers that shouldn't be, trying to elicit emotional responses. I think there's also there's also an element of divide and conquer.
We need to talk about checkers and chess. Let's just stop this video, because that is, my friend, completely and totally the checkers and chess dialogue.
Well,
yeah.
You
want to go there, so let's go there.
Oh, no, I want to pause. I just want to say there's elements of divide and conquer. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to introduce it towards the end of this one. And then it's pertinent to Hegelian dialectic very much. So it's just let's just draw the line to those two ideas.